The Baltic is the most fortified sea in Europe. Every empire that held this coastline poured concrete into it, bolted guns to the cliffs, and sealed the islands off. Then they declared their own fortresses strategic mistakes, dynamited the batteries, and walked away. The concrete held. 10 of them are still out there, half drowned in the surf, or rusting on islands the military never gave back. Stick with it to number 1, Karosta in Latvia, an entire naval district sealed for a century, with a cathedral, a submarine base, and a prison that never let a single inmate escape. The story behind every one of them is the same. The sea was the front door, and every government that ruled the Baltic was convinced someone was about to kick it in. Number 10. Suurupi, Estonia. On the rocky southern shore of the Hel Peninsula, about 15 kilometers from central Tallinn, a row of concrete gun positions sits low against the tree line. These are the remains of the Suurupi rear battery, one node of a vast fortification line known as Peter the Great's naval fortress, a chain of coastal artillery planned after the Battle of Tsushima in 1905 to seal the Gulf of Finland from any fleet heading for St. Petersburg. The Tsar approved the scheme in 1912. Construction began almost immediately along both the Finnish and Estonian coasts. After Estonian independence in 1918, the new republic inherited the batteries and folded them into its own coastal defence. The Estonian Navy ran guns at Suurupi, Aegna, Naissaar, and half a dozen other positions around Tallinn Bay, 656 men in peacetime, over 1,000 when the alert went up. In 1940, the Soviets annexed Estonia and took the lot. When that system collapsed 50 years later, the guns came out and the positions stayed. You can walk to Suurupi today. The concrete is cracked, the embrasures are empty, and the pines are growing through the floors. Nobody posted a sign. Nobody fenced them off. The embrasures that once held 6-inch cannet guns are open to the weather, and the magazine chambers underneath still smell of damp concrete and salt. The Baltic just keeps arriving. Number 9. Tahkuna, Hiiumaa, Estonia. Hiiumaa is Estonia's second largest island, and the Tahkuna Peninsula at its northern tip was fortified because it commands the widest stretch of open water between Estonia and Finland. The Russian Empire began work here in 1913 under the same fortress plan that produced Suurupi, and the scale was considerable. Observation towers went up on the cliff tops, and gun emplacements were cut into the rock so the barrels sat just above the tree line. The retreating Russians blew up most of their own fortifications in October 1917, when the Germans landed on the islands. What survived was rebuilt during Estonian independence, then fortified again when the Soviets took control in 1940. During the entire Soviet occupation, the Estonian coastline was designated a restricted military zone. On Hiiumaa, the military sealed Tahkuna from the civilians on the rest of the island, added Cold War observation positions, and stationed border guards whose job was to prevent anyone from leaving the country by sea. When the Soviets withdrew after independence, they stripped what they could carry and abandoned the rest. A handful of the bunkers were used as storage by local farmers. Most were simply left. The towers are still standing. The concrete is stained orange with rust from the reinforcement bars, and the observation slits look out across the water toward Finland as though someone might still be watching. Nobody is. Partisans hid in the forests of Hiiumaa for years after the war, and the last of them were not caught until the early 1950s. The towers they were hiding from have outlasted every one of them. Number 8. Osmussaar, Estonia. There is an island off the northwest coast of Estonia where the Soviet army blew up a boulder they believed was the grave of a Viking god. The island is Osmussaar, known in Swedish as Odensholm. And in 1934, it was home to 131 people, all of them Estonian Swedes, except for the lighthouse keeper and his family. In 1939, the Red Army arrived under the terms of a mutual bases agreement with Estonia, and the islanders were ordered to leave. 7 families are named on a plaque on the wall of what remains of the island's chapel. The military built a twin 180mm coastal battery on the farmland, a command post, and a range-finding tower. By September 1941, one of the gun facilities was doubling as a military hospital with over 100 beds. In December of that year, with German forces closing in, the retreating Soviet garrison blew up both guns, destroyed the lighthouse, and demolished the chapel. The turrets were scrapped for metal in 1945. The original islanders never came back. Most fled to Sweden. Through the entire Soviet occupation, Osmussaar was a restricted zone, and civilians were not permitted to return until the 1990s. Today, 2 families live on the island and raise sheep. The lighthouse was rebuilt in 1954. The chapel is a facade with no building behind it. The battery ruins sit in the undergrowth where the farmland used to be. A plaque commemorating the expelled families was fixed to the chapel wall after independence. And a new belfry was consecrated in 1994 by descendants who had spent 50 years in Sweden, wondering if the island still existed. The boulder that may or may not have marked the grave of Odin is gone. The army used it for concrete aggregate. Number 7. Naissaar, Estonia. If you are enjoying this list, hit subscribe because there are more of these for every coastline in Europe. We will get to the one that is not a fort at all in a moment, but Naissaar deserves its own minute. This is a 19-square-kilometre island in Tallinn Bay that the Soviets turned into an anti-ship mine factory. Workshops, storage facilities, barracks, a power station, and 38 kilometres of narrow-gauge railway to move the mines from the assembly halls to the harbour and out into the fleet. The island had been fortified since the Tsarist fortress plan placed it at the centre of a line meant to close the 36-kilometre gap between the Estonian and Finnish coasts with overlapping fields of artillery fire. The Estonians used it as a defence post between the wars. Then the Soviets expanded it beyond anything previously seen. There is an officers' casino on Naissaar whose original purpose nobody can confirm. It burned during the First World War, was rebuilt in 1924, served as barracks during the Soviet era, and now stands derelict in the trees. The railway tracks are still visible. The battery positions are overgrown, the mine factory is silent, and the whole island is a nature reserve. You can camp on it, pitch a tent among the birches, and listen to the wind rattle the corrugated roofing on buildings that used to fill with high explosives. The island's name, incidentally, translates as female island, and nobody has ever convincingly explained why. Number 6. Hel Peninsula, Poland. The Hel Spit is a 35-kilometre sandbar curling into the Bay of Gdansk like a crooked finger. The Polish Navy fortified it in the 1930s, building a fixed coastal battery near the tip at Helltown and digging positions along the dunes. In September 1939, the Hel garrison was one of the last Polish military units to surrender, holding out until the 2nd of October, weeks after Warsaw had fallen. After the war, the Soviets installed their own coastal gun positions on the Spit, and the Polish military took them over under Warsaw Pact arrangements. For decades, the entire tip of the peninsula was sealed military territory. Parts of it remain restricted to this day. You can walk the public beaches and the fishing villages, and then hit a fence with a sign you are not invited to argue with. The Polish Navy's presence has thinned since the Cold War ended, but the concrete from that era is still there behind the dunes in varying states of decomposition. Sand has buried the lower courses of some gun positions. Others are cracking open as the shoreline shifts beneath them. The Hel Spit is narrowing year by year. In places, the sandbar is barely 200 meters wide, and each winter storm pushes the waterline a little closer to the concrete. The tourists come for the beaches and the seals. The batteries sit behind them in the marram grass, unlabelled and unexplained, and the sea is doing to them what the military has not bothered to. Number 5. Świnoujście, Poland. At the mouth of the Świna River, where Poland meets Germany on the Baltic coast, there is a cluster of coastal forts that have been passed between armies so many times that the walls carry inscriptions in 4 languages. The Prussians built the original fortifications in the mid-19th century, a ring of works designed to protect what was then the German naval port of Swinemünde. The Germans expanded them through both world wars. In 1945, the Red Army took the town, and the new Polish state inherited a fortress system it had not built, in a city whose entire population had been replaced. The Soviets added their own layers, concrete observation posts and coastal gun positions, built to defend a redrawn border before handing operational control to the Polish military. Fort Gaharda, known as Work 3, is the best preserved and now operates as a museum. Fort Aniola, the Angel Fort, sits closer to the water and is in worse shape. The Soviet-era additions are the ones furthest out toward the sea, and they are not museums. They are slabs of reinforced concrete on a shoreline that has been eroding for decades, angled toward a sea approach that a Cold War planner once considered the most vulnerable stretch of coastline in the Warsaw Pact's northern tier. The planner's name is in no archive anyone has opened. The concrete he ordered is still there. But the place at the top of this list makes all of these look like footnotes. Number 4. Baltiysk, Kaliningrad. Baltiysk is the place on this list you are least likely ever to visit. The town, formerly the Prussian fortress of Pillau, guards the channel into the Vistula Lagoon and has been a Russian naval base since the Red Army took it in April 1945. The Prussian citadel, a star-shaped brick fort dating to the 1670s, still stands at the harbour mouth. 2 centuries of modifications sit on top of it. The Soviets poured concrete over the Prussian brick, added barracks, observation points, and a submarine infrastructure that remains classified. Baltiysk is the headquarters of the Russian Baltic Fleet's surface forces, the westernmost naval base Russia holds in the Baltic. The town itself is a closed military settlement, with a population that exists almost entirely to support the fleet. Russian civilians require special permits to enter, and foreign visitors are, in practice, not admitted. The gun emplacements on the channel walls are maintained, not abandoned. The fortress is still doing exactly what it was built to do 350 years ago, and the Soviet concrete is just the latest skin. The Prussian moat still holds water. The Soviet-era housing blocks are still occupied. Everywhere else on this list, the sea is taking the forts back. Baltiysk is the one place where the military is still holding the line, and it does not intend to let you watch. Number 3. Aegna, Estonia. 3 square kilometers of island in the northeast corner of Tallinn Bay, and nearly all of it is military concrete. The Alexander Nevsky Battery, built in 1915, is 180 meters of reinforced structure running along the island's northwest shore with barbettes at both ends that once held 12-inch guns. A 3-kilometer narrow-gauge railway crossed the island to move ammunition from the stores to the batteries. At its peak, half the men serving in Estonia's Naval Fortress Division were stationed on Aegna. The island had barracks, a clinic, a bakery, a library, and a command center completed in 1927. The Soviets stationed around 100 Marines here until 1957, building new anti-aircraft positions with Bofor's 40mm guns near the old searchlight bunkers. After that, the military walked out, and the civilians were allowed back for the first time since the coastline had been sealed. 21 people live on Aegna permanently. The battery walls are intact. The railway bed is still visible under the moss. The command centre is a shell, with birch trees growing through the windows, and the old officers' mess has collapsed into a heap of brick and timber that the moss is slowly digesting. You can take a summer ferry from Tallinn, walk the 15 kilometres of trail, and spend the afternoon inside a fortress that 3 successive states built, and none of them bothered to demolish. Number 2. Kronstadt, Russia. Remember the fortress plan that produced Suurupi and Aegna? This is where the idea started, and the scale is something else entirely. Kronstadt is not a fortress on an island. It is a fortress made of islands. 17 artificial forts arranged in a chain across the Gulf of Finland, built to protect St. Petersburg from anything that tried to sail up the Neva. Peter the Great started it in 1703 by ordering workers to build wooden blockhouses on the frozen sea in winter, fill them with stones, and let them sink through to the seabed when the thaw came. The walls went up on top. Over the next 2 centuries, the forts were expanded, rearmed, and rebuilt in brick, iron, and concrete until they formed the heaviest concentration of coastal artillery in the Baltic. Fort Alexander I earned the nickname the Plague Fort after it was converted into a research laboratory for deadly diseases in the late 19th century. In 1921, the Kronstadt sailors revolted against the Bolshevik government in one of the most dramatic uprisings of the early Soviet period, and the Red Army crossed the ice to retake the forts by force. During the Second World War, the batteries at Kronstadt helped defend Leningrad through 900 days of siege, and a Stuka pilot named Hans Ulrich Rudel sank the battleship Marat at anchor in the harbour. After that, the fortress slowly lost its purpose. Kronstadt was a closed city through the entire Soviet era. Today, it is open, connected to St. Petersburg by a road. The forts themselves are abandoned, stripped of anything worth taking, the brick vaults holding despite decades of Baltic weather. The corridors flooded, the masonry crumbling into shapes that look less like buildings and more like geology. They are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tour boats pass them on the way to St. Petersburg. Nobody guards them, and everything that was at least slightly valuable has been stripped or stolen. Number 1. Karosta, Liepāja, Latvia. Everything on this list, the island batteries, the sealed peninsulas, the drowned gun positions, is a footnote to this place. Karosta is not a fort. It is a city. 1/3 of Liepāja, Latvia's 3rd largest city, was built as a self-contained naval fortress beginning in 1890 on the orders of Tsar Alexander III. The architect was Major General Ivan MacDonald, and the plan was vast. A harbour for 140 warships and 30 submarines. A breakwater 1,800 metres long, 4 coastal artillery batteries armed with guns up to 280 millimetres. Barracks, a power station, a water supply, a school, a pigeon post tower built for 450 birds, and an Orthodox naval cathedral consecrated in 1903 with the personal attendance of Tsar Nicholas II and his family. It lasted less than a decade. In November 1908, the Russian government declared the entire Liepāja fortress a strategic mistake. The cannons were dismantled and shipped to the fortress at Kaunas in Lithuania or melted down. The fortification structures were detonated twice, but the concrete held. The batteries cracked and tilted, but would not fall. Over the following century, the Baltic has done what the dynamite could not. The sea has eroded the foundations, and great slabs of fort now lie half-drowned in the surf along the northern shore, sinking into the sand year by year. The official advice is not to walk beneath them, because the shore is eroding and slabs can fall without warning. Behind the drowning batteries, the military city kept going. The Soviets arrived in 1939, turned Karosta into a closed submarine base for the Baltic fleet, and sealed the district from its own city. Up to 25,000 military personnel and their families lived inside a perimeter that the residents of Liepāja were forbidden to cross. 16 submarines were based in the harbour. Nuclear weapons were stored on site. The Orthodox cathedral was converted into a cinema and a sports hall. The prison, built around 1900 as a military hospital, but never used as one, held disciplinary prisoners through Tsarist, Nazi, Soviet and Latvian administrations. No one ever escaped from it. The last inmates scratched their calendars on the cell walls in 1997. You can still walk the 1,800-metre northern breakwater into the sea, a structure built between 1890 and 1892 as one of the first pieces of the fortress. And from the end of it, you can see the forts in the water and the apartment blocks behind them, the whole arc of a project that started with a tsar and ended with a fence. When the Soviet military finally left in 1994, Karosta emptied. The apartment blocks stand half occupied and half derelict, Tsarist red brick next to Soviet prefab concrete, the cathedral restored, the prison converted into the most uncomfortable hotel in Europe, and the gun batteries still lying in the water at the edge of the district, precisely where they fell when somebody set off the charges more than a century ago. I have walked past a lot of fences for this channel, but the ones at Karosta are different. They are not keeping you out of a single battery or a sealed bunker. They are keeping you out of a neighbourhood where 25,000 people once lived, worked, posted letters by pigeon, and were told the entire arrangement was a fortress. The fortress was declared a mistake. The people left. The concrete is still sinking into the Baltic, and it will be there long after everyone who built it is forgotten. There are coastlines like this all around the Baltic. Sealed islands, drowned batteries, gun positions. The retreating army blew up, and the sea is still trying to finish off. 10 of them today. There are more. There are always more. Subscribe and we will find the next 10 together. Thank you.